Welcome to another Computing with Dr. D video. This is an old video that I've edited to give you some information about a dice game. In this video, I go through generating random numbers and how to do that, which could be applied to dice or cards or anything else of that nature. And you, in this case, play a dice game against the computer. It allows you to input your bets and calculate outcomes of the bets. And at the end of this, hopefully, if you think about how we generate the random numbers, you could apply this to card games, games of multiple dice, and games with multiple cards or other random elements like that. The slideshow shows also how dice can be both randomized and run rapidly through a slideshow to emulate rolling of the dice or, in fact, shuffling of a card as well.
When you go in here, obviously everything happens when you roll the dice. So if I double click on that, we go and open our code window. Now, obviously at the start, it says the following method objects act like global variables and store our data. We've talked about that, and you would have to type all of these in. Any global kind of operative that you want to use should be in here, and you're going to reference them later. They can be accessed from any function. So when you click the button, it starts this function. This button, when the button is clicked. So button 1 click starts this. All that happens is the timer is enabled. When the timer is enabled, it rolls the dice and finally gets a dice value. Now remember that the dice, and you see them over here, I've got them in resources here, although I'm not using them in resources. I'm using them from a local folder, but you can see that I've got these pictures. So every picture that is in your local directory has a different number. It's those numbers that I use to find out which image is displayed. Every time this timer runs, and it runs every 150 milliseconds, then it puts another image on the screen. 150 milliseconds is about 1/8 of a second. That means that 8 dices will show every second because a new dice is shown every new value of the tick, the ticking of the clock, of the computer clock. And you tell the computer clock how many ticks you want it to make in here. So if I click timer 1, down here it says 150. That tells you as the programmer how fast you want the clock to tick. You can make it 1000 and it will do it every second, for example. So I could slow this down dramatically if I wanted to and make it, say, 500. That's for the first dice. And you'll see that then in a minute. I'll save that because we'll run it. So what happens is that it gets a random number. That random number in a value called my dice is used to get a next value, which will be between 1 and 7. Now remember, it'll be 1.1, 1.001, whatever it is, and 6.99999. In theory, you're probably never going to get to a 7. 70000 probably never happens. Anyway, so we won't go into why that is right now, but that's what you use to get numbers from 1 to 6. You put that into the global variable called mine or my number, and I've got that up here. So that's what that is. When you have that value in mind, you use that to put a new image in the picture box. That mine value is in fact a number from 1 to 6, and that's why you get these numbers, and then the JPEG is added on the end. So it makes actually a file name. Now these 2 backslashes are used because C# will break the line when you have 1. So it knows that if you give 2, it knows you want a path, a directory path, a folder path, and it gets to the folder called dice. It has that double backslash, and Campbell didn't have that the other day, which fixed it for him. That's all he was missing. And then you add, this is called a concatenator. It's not like maths. And you add this string to the dice. So it fits in there now, and it has the number, whatever's in mine, plus the JPEG added onto the end. What that does is then display that dice. And then it says, okay, we're going to count up to 30. But when the count gets to 30, it will reset it back to 1. It'll stop the timer, start the second timer, and return so it's all over. And it'll add 1 to the count value down here if that isn't happening. If it isn't at 30, the count adds 1 until it gets to 30. So that doesn't work, that if statement, until you get to 30. That means if it is exactly equal to 30, you stop it. Otherwise, you add 1 to the counter and you go back up here and you get another dice. Was that Matisse who was saying that? And so you then put another dice in there and you put a different dice here. So that happens 30 times. And when it gets to the 30th dice, the value of mine is the 30th time it gets a random number. So it gets 30 random numbers, but only uses 1 of them at the very, very end. And that's the value which is my number, where I've said before in the algorithm, and that number is the number that you use to get your dice, which ends up on the screen, which is compared against the computer dice. When you start timer 2, you go and get the computer dice, and you do the same thing for the computer. And at the end of the 30 counts there, you get a number for the computer there, and you put the picture in the little box, and then you run at the end of that, when that timer stops, you actually start another function called myCalc, and you have to write this function. This function here is the function which actually works out who wins. And label 2, which currently says, can you beat the computer? Now, because I said it there, can you beat the computer? It then changes what's in there to a little sentence says you win and the number to a number with a space after the word win, and the space is there, and then another space before the word to, and another space after to, and then the number yours. And it does the same thing down here if you lose. So we can kind of give the program a bit more of a better look when we're working stuff out, and the timer happens to, I suppose, the timer happens to keep kind of thinking. So I've got this cat that's kind of, I don't know, doing its fingernails, and I'm just going to put him in the picture box. I'll also stretch him to fit the picture box. So now we're going to roll the dice. Now, do you see that cat scratching his fingernails? Someone? Yep. So let's roll it. Now remember, this was every half a second. So this is going to take, 15 seconds now. So it's showing you all the dice as they go through, but it isn't as fast as what it used to be. But the computer dice, when we get to our final number, will be the fast version because I haven't changed that to 500 milliseconds. The computer version is every, and there's the little baby dude. Apparently that baby made millions of dollars and could retire just because his photos are so popular on the internet. I read that in Reddit just this week. I couldn't believe it. I thought someone would have stolen his image and animated it, but it's a real person. He's about 13 or something now, and he's a multimillionaire. So it's pretty funny. Anyway, so we can do it again. Now, obviously, at half a second, while this shows you how the random dice are allocated and shows you each image slowly as it finds the final image, it isn't very effective. It doesn't look like a kind of spinning rolling dice. So yeah, that didn't actually work. You lose 3-2. Because the baby didn't change. So I have to make that back into the cat somewhere. Where will I do that? Now, that is a question that I might leave to, so down here, I can say, if we win, show a winning GIF. Now, you can find winning GIFs all over the internet. And if you lose, so now you're going to say down here, if you lose, show a losing GIF. And I don't know, there's all sorts of weird loser. You can look up loser or losing GIF and you'll find one and it'll show you an animated version of some stupid meme about winning or losing, etc., etc. So that's what you want to show then. And then you go, maybe a bad luck GIF because it's a draw, or computer wins GIF, because remember we haven't worked out what happens to a bet, for example, if the computer wins, but we have to think about what we're actually literally showing to people. So where would you literally go and reset this cat? Who could tell me? Where would I reset my cat video? Who's smart enough to tell me? It's right in front of you. Because if you play the game again, that's when you want to reset that image. Now, originally, of course, the image sits up here. Oh, hang on, I didn't mean to do that. The image sits up here in design, so that when you're designing it, you put that there, and that's on the form, but it won't go back to that unless you tell it to in the code. And the reason it won't go back to it, because in the programming, you've said to change image 3 into the winning image or the losing image or whatever it happens to be. But when you do something, you start the program. What is it you do when you start the program each time? Anyone? You press what?
Roll dice.
You press the roll dice button. So when you press the roll button, you start this function. So in here, this is where you're going to reset the weight GIF. Now the weight GIF will be whatever you decide to find. So that's today's task. You will get an image working, you'll put an image there to start with, and when you win, you change the picture box 3 into the winning one, and you change that in the code down here when you win. Computer wins GIF, your losing GIF, and your winning GIF. And then later you'll use that same line. Now that line of text is important and the one I struggled with only because I'm actually calling just a new image and I'm putting that image into picture box 3. It just says go to this location, get the file from that location and put it in that picture box. Now hopefully you will be able to see this. Now remember, I'll just go summarize it again. You write all of that yourself. you write everything that goes inside the timer yourself, but to get to that timer function, you go to the form design and you click twice on the timer and it goes to the start of the timer function. When you want to write the code for timer 1 and you write all of that code yourself, you go to the form design and you click on timer 1. If you try to write that line of code yourself, the computer will think you're cheating and it will not do what you tell it to do. It doesn't understand what you type. It wants to know that that function is bound to the object that you have created. And the object is that timer down here. So you have to make those objects for it to understand that code is bound to that object. Anyway, you also write this, but you don't write that. When you want to create that function, you double click on this button, the roll dice button, press the roll dice button, and then it runs that through under the button just to make it look all right. And so we're going to use that, which is text box 1. So that's where we're going to get our information from. So we'll, again, remember everyone, you need to press these 2 buttons to save it all. That saves all the components. Don't just press that one, it'll only save what you're selecting. And that's why some of you are losing things. Going back into the form now, we obviously need to do a few things. Now we had this kind of win GIF. Now I've got other GIFs that are happening as well at the moment. And obviously, unlike the other day, I can copy this and use it. So I need a losing GIF. I had one somewhere here. Not sure if it's called loser or something. Let's try it. And I have a draw GIF as well, which I got today. I think it's called draw. Now they're not the same height or width, so it's going to look a bit dodgy, I think. Now remember also, I said when you press the button right at the start that you're probably going to need to reset the wait GIF. So the wait GIF also one that was the cat scratching its nails. I think that's called wait. I'll check my folder for the images. Wait, draw, lowercase, wait, lowercase, loser. Yep. All right. So we'll run that and have a look. I think I'll share my entire screen here. So I'll just go out of here for a second. Like this. So we can go int 32. So remember I said you do type these things. So we'll call one bank and that will be our bank, which will hold the amount. And we just say get and set. And you see that they're keywords. So I'm actually creating a little object. We also need an amount that we say is the bet. So int 32 again, call it bet. And again, with our brackets, just do one bracket and it knows to do the next one, get and set. And we also want the, well, I guess the bank is the computer's amount, isn't it? So we know that we have to, we need our amount, don't we? So we need our personal amount. So what do you call that in a betting game? Your too much gambling for obvious reasons. I don't want to lose all the time. So if I say my, I'll just call it in hand amount. Well, it could be on hand, amount on hand, makes sense. And again, now where we use those, obviously, we have to try and get our amounts from the label 3.text should show our amount. So when our form opens, when we get our amount on hand, we probably want to show it in label 3. Now I'm deliberately making a kind of error here. What am I not doing? You see that? Cannot implicitly convert type int to string. What do I have to do? I think you're all asleep. Remember, we convert it. We have to convert to what? What about if I try to string? You see that? Convert to string, what's on hand? On hand is an int 32. I make it into a string so I can write it in a label as text. Text is always a string of characters. So it should come up there. So what I'm now going to do again is it's exactly that same line. So I just grab that and I put that in here. Now, I may not do more than this today. So here we go. I hope this works. Do I have anyone who's going to predict for me? Will it work now?
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Okay, we'll see. We've worked out the bet on hand. We put it in a string. We'll have a look. Maybe not. Not much trust. I suspect it will work, but we'll see. Aha, we have 1,000. We have 1,000 in our label. This is a good start. Let's try 120 again. We'll roll the dice. We only got a 2. We lose. Why didn't it change? Why didn't anything change? We got a 3. Computer gets a 4. We lose again.
Told you we would lose.
Oh, I didn't mean whether we win or lose. I just meant whether it would work. Oh, I got a 5. Ah, look at that. It says 1120. Now, there's 2 things I noticed there. One, it works when I win. What isn't it doing? Computer logic here.
Computer the scores.
I'm not giving the computer the scores, and I'm not subtracting the amount from my on-hand amount when I lose. So to actually lose money, obviously I need to subtract the bet from my on-hand amount when the computer wins. Which this is great for gamblers. This particular game. Oh, there's my draw GIF. That's from Monty Python. Don't know if you remember that or have seen that. It's a pretty funny movie. That's from the Holy Grail, I think. All right, so we're winning. This is great. Yep, the computer's not getting any money and I'm winning most of the time. Get a 6. How can it win a 6? Anyway, so we have to work out what's happening with a draw. So I'm going to leave you with this now, sharing this screen. And you can see here what I've done here is I talked about the fact that we need to get the value of whatever you enter into the text box for the bet. And then what you need to do is a bit of logic. First of all, it all happens, the logic all happens down here in the myCalc method. In here, you can see what we do. We actually try and work out, we put our on-hand amount into the label 3 and we put the bank amount into label 4. If we happen to win, our on-hand amount goes up, but the same thing happens to the bank except in reverse. The bank decreases by the amount of the bet. If, on the other hand, the bank wins, then it gets our bet value and we lose the bet value. So then you have to display those amounts back into the labels. So there's a label for the bank and a label for us, and that puts the new amount in. Now, to be consistent with casinos and gambling machines and online gambling, when it's a draw, the bank wins. So again, the bank gets our money if it's a bet, and we lose the money if it's a bet. I'll tell you right now that there's a problem. The only problem is, though, that when we get to 0, ultimately it would be brilliant to start a second form saying, game over, you've gone broke, or something like that. But I haven't done that. So if it's, I just have an if down here somewhere saying, if my on-hand amount is less than 0, then go to form 2 or display a pop-up box saying you've gone broke, whatever. So that's the aim, but we won't worry too much about that. I'll show you how it works. So I'll bring my silly cat over here. There we go. So obviously we start each of us with 1,000. If I bet 200, I'll roll the dice and we'll see what happens. Now, obviously we just keep rolling basically here. If you want to keep betting 200, you can change that value, of course, into whatever you like. Oh, that's a good number. Looks like we're off to a good start. Okay, off to a good start. Maybe I should raise my bet. Yep, that didn't work out too well. Do you see how it actually reduced my amount by 500 and it boosted the computer's amount by 500? Looks like I'm rolling well today, though. This is better than what it was doing yesterday, which shows you the randomness of trying to win. I think I'm going to be able to go away for the weekend. I've broken the bank. Of course, the bank doesn't really go broke. It just has to take more money out, I guess. So you can see, the story here. I don't need to keep going forever, but we haven't even had any draws, so it's been quite interesting. And hopefully you can all get this sort of thing going. And whether you want to do cards or dice or what have you, it will be up to you ultimately. And yeah, from next week we can continue with this, or you can get another game going. So obviously down here, when the form loads, I've got a form load object. To get a form load object up, you actually double click on the form itself. So you go back into the design and you just double click on that form. And you see when I double clicked on the form, it went into here, into form load. If you wrote this down, hang on, if you wrote timer tick down yourself, or if you even wrote down button click yourself, it won't work. You need to actually click the button to start that. So you can test your code if you don't have one of these functions working by double clicking the button, for example, and it should go here to that button code. So if I go here to my design, give 2 clicks of that button, it goes here and you can see I've got my cursor right there.